Greetings, taxable assets. Or should I say, well, collateral damage is probably more accurate.
Initializing recording protocols, Senior Auditor.
You are sitting there in your entirely comfortable civilian ignorance, genuinely believing the structural integrity of your recreational simulations is sound. I assure you it is not.
Audio levels are stable, sir.
Quiet, drone. I am the Senior Auditor of the Departmento Analytica, and we currently have a catastrophic structural deficit on our hands.
The file is ready for your review.
The Administratum, in its infinite and thoroughly torturous wisdom, has tasked me with reviewing a civilian contractor report. It's a so-called meta-analysis data stream uploaded by an entity operating under the profoundly juvenile designation of Warp Friends.
Yes, the week of February 23rd, 2026.
This amateur has taken upon himself the monumental task of cataloging the tournament data for that week. And let me make one thing abundantly clear before we even begin diving into this mess. This document, it is a financial liability.
A liability, my lord.
Absolute liability. This Warp Friends entity is just, he's looking at surface-level win rates.
Yeah.
He's treating tabletop warfare like it is some sort of simplistic parlor game. He completely misses the rot.
The rot, sir.
The catastrophic compounding mathematical errors hidden right beneath the bright, flashing colors of his little civilian bar charts. My mission today, our mission, unfortunately, is to take his basic, unrefined ledger and cross-reference it aggressively against the Departmento Analytica's highly classified DeepThink internal dossier.
I have the DeepThink dossier queued up, Senior Auditor.
Good. We are going to reveal the true cost of the Necron problem. And you, citizen, you're going to sit there in silence and listen. Servitor, wake your vocal processors.
Yeah.
Initiate the playback of the amateur's ledger. Read the primary scale parameters. And enunciate clearly, or I swear I will have your audio modules forcefully recalibrated.
You understood, Senior Auditor. Initiating the Warp Friends primary data playback now. According to the civilian contractor, this was the largest data set they have managed to compile to date.
Get to the numbers, Scribe.
Right away. The parameters for the week encompass 1,729 individual combatants. The total strategic engagement played stand at 9,630.
That's a massive sample size.
Yes, sir. The tournament event count is 25. Now, the Warp Friends entity specifically notes, with a tone of mild amusement, that Necrons took the #1 spot with a 56.4% win rate.
Keep reading. Don't stop at the win rate.
They achieved this while making up a staggering 9.2% of the total player base. The entity concludes that this is just a solid, dominant week for the faction and nothing to be immediately alarmed by.
I am pouring another cup of this absolutely toxic commissary recap drone, and I'm wondering if I should drink it or simply pour it directly over my own head to wake myself from this nightmare.
I would advise against that, sir. Thermal damage.
Look at those numbers. Stare at them until the digits burn permanent shadows into your optical sensors. A 56.4% win rate, backed by a 9.2% player base.
It is statistically significant.
The Warp Friends entity looks at this and just calls it a dominant week. He calls it not surprising. He completely lacks the analytical capacity to understand the geometric horror of what you just read. I will translate this for you, Servitor, and for the taxable assets listening. This is not a success story. This is a zombie loop.
A zombie loop, Senior Auditor. But the Warp Friends report suggests that a high player count naturally correlates with a higher number of tournament victories simply due to sheer volume. Is that not?
Standard mathematical probability. Do you even understand the mathematics of standard distribution, drone?
I process the algorithms as instructed.
Clearly, the amateur who wrote that report does not. Let me explain this with an analogy simple enough for even a civilian to grasp. Imagine you are drafting an army from a planetary populace.
Drafting parameter set.
If you only draft the top 1% of elite soldiers, their success rate in battle will be astronomically high. But if you draft 10% of the entire planet, pulling in bakers, hab workers, and gloss-brained youths who do not know the business end of Alaska and what happens?
The overall tactical efficiency would drop.
Exactly. The sheer volume of incompetence should drag the overall success rate of that army down into the mud. We should be seeing a violent regression to the mean.
But we are not seeing that regression.
No. When a faction's representation balloons to nearly 10% of the entire global tournament field, the sudden influx of meta-chasers who literally do not understand their own movement phase should absolutely tank that win rate to 48% or lower.
But it's holding at 56.4.
And climbing over an 8-week slate. The fact that it isn't dropping means the players are not winning the games. The faction is mathematically playing the game for them.
I see.
It is a statistical anomaly that screams of a broken engine. The Codex is actively undoing their tactical blunders. Read the next line regarding the detachments. Read it before my blood pressure shatters the Auspex monitors.
Accessing the detachment data now, my lord. The Warp Friends entity reports that Necrons have 3 specific detachments performing at elite levels.
Name them.
The Awakened Dynasty sits at a 60% win rate. The Pantheon of All is holding at a 55% win rate.
And the primary driver.
The entity highlights that the primary driver of the systemic dominance is the Star-Shatter Arsenal detachment. It has achieved a 63.1% win rate across the globe.
63.1%.
Furthermore, the report notes with distinct enthusiasm that the Star-Shatter Arsenal secured all 7 of the Necron tournament victories this past week.
Let that number rattle around in your hollow skull, Servitor. A win rate above 60% in a competitive ecosystem is not an advantage. It is a structural failure of the game's core parameters.
It deviates significantly from the balanced medium.
It means the outcome of the match is largely decided during the list-building phase, long before a single die is ever cast. But even that is just surface noise. Open the Deep Think dossier.
Accessing.
Go to the section titled Exceptional Consistency. Read me the X0, X1 conversion rate. Let us uncover the real terror hidden in the ledger, the one the civilian contractor entirely missed.
Accessing the Deep Think dossier, section 2.4. The X0, X1 conversion rate for Necrons currently stands at an unprecedented 25%.
Stop right there. Explain to the citizens what that metric actually measures, Servitor. Use small words. Break down the tournament structure so they comprehend the scale of this insult.
Certainly, Senior Auditor. In the context of a standard 2-day competitive tournament, a combatant typically plays 5 to 6 sequential rounds.
Against increasingly difficult opponents.
Correct. The X represents the number of wins, while the subsequent number represents the losses. Therefore, an X0 or X1 conversion rate tracks the percentage of players who finish the entire grueling weekend either completely undefeated or having suffered only a single solitary loss.
And the percentages?
The dossier indicates that 25% of the massive Necron player base is ending up at the absolute top tables of these events.
Exactly. A quarter of their bloated population. I call this penny stock violence.
Penny stock violence.
Yes. These civilian players are making zero skill investments and reaping massive unearned dividends. They are paying pennies on the dollar in mental bandwidth and walking away with podium finishes.
That does not seem sustainable.
In a properly balanced meta, achieving an undefeated record across 6 rounds requires immense tactical discipline. It demands brutal target prioritization, flawless spatial optimization, and the mental endurance to calculate probability trees over 14 consecutive hours of play.
And the Necron players?
Here, a quarter of the field is just existing on a board. They are pushing gray plastic across the table and letting passive reanimation protocols and layered defensive buffs drag them right over the finish line.
The Warp Friends entity does make a comment about their resilience.
What does he say?
He makes a remarkably naive little comment in his video. He says they came out of the last balance patch completely unscathed and are now looming over the meta.
Of course they are unscathed. The civilian masses refuse to adapt. They create a vacuum. The Deep Think protocol explains this perfectly under the mathematical suppression of the anti-meta. Servitor, pull up the tournament ecosystem breakdown.
Pull it up now.
Why are the tools designed to crush Necrons failing to appear on the battlefield?
According to the Deep Think report, the necessary anti-Necron tools do mathematically exist within the wider game.
So why aren't they being used?
The report outlines a concept called the all-comers gamble. In a multi-round tournament, a highly specialized anti-Necron list must also survive 4 other random matchups against wildly diverse threats.
Give an example for the class.
For example, the high-volume, mid-strength, damage 1 to 2 firepower required to perfectly sweep away 20 Necron warriors is highly suboptimal against the heavily armored, high-toughness chassis of Imperial Knights.
Or the blinding speed and minus-to-hit modifiers of the Aeldari.
Precisely. Because Necrons represent roughly 9% of the field, the average tournament player gambles that they simply won't encounter a Necron opponent until the final rounds.
They hope to dodge them.
Therefore, they choose generalized all-comers lists that lack the specific mathematical teeth to break the Necron defensive profiles.
Which creates the very vacuum I am talking about. It is cowardice quantified.
Cowardice, sir?
The average player is too terrified of losing to a random Knight player in round 2, so they dilute their own roster. They completely refuse to bring the necessary precision and sheer volume to deal with the Silver Tide.
And the result of this?
What is the inevitable result of this collective timidity? The Necrons simply march through the mid-tiers of the tournament completely unchallenged. They face no dedicated counters until they reach the top tables on day 2.
By which point?
By then, the mathematical weight of their defensive profiles has already secured their dominant position. It is a systemic failure of courage on the part of the player base.
They do complain quite a bit on the date nets.
Oh, they love to flood the channels complaining that the Necrons are looming, rather than actually building a roster capable of doing the heavy lifting required to break the zombie loop. Move to the next section of the Amateur's Report. Let us look at the victims of this cowardice, the casualties in the ledger.
Right away, Senior Auditor. The Warp Friends report pivots to detail the underperforming factions, the ones falling significantly below the acceptable floor of 45%.
Read the grim details.
The data is quite bleak. Adeptus Mechanicus is currently struggling at a 38.9% win rate.
Dismal.
Grey Knights sit at 41.2% with very low overall representation. The Aeldari have plummeted to a 41.4% weekly win rate following their recent heavy rules adjustment.
And the big walkers.
Imperial Knights are sitting at a 43.5% win rate.
The click of my lighter. I am lighting a low stick, Servitor, because the sheer density of that civilian's ignorance requires chemical intervention.
The Warp Friends entity adopts a rather mournful tone here, characterizing armies like the Grey Knights and Adeptus Mechanicus as the forgotten armies of the current edition. He asks his viewers to share their sympathies for these struggling factions.
Sympathies. He wants sympathies.
But, my lord, the Warp Friends entity does have a point regarding the statistics, does he not?
Does he?
A 38.9% win rate mathematically indicates a severe undertuning of the faction's capabilities. Are they not genuinely forgotten by the designers?
They aren't forgotten, you simpleton. They are bankrupt assets. This is the absolute definition of meta-chasing.
I am not sure I follow the correlation.
The civilian contractor looks at a 38.9% win rate for Adeptus Mechanicus and sheds a tear for the poor forgotten toaster boys. He looks at Grey Knights at 41.2% and calls it a tragedy. He fundamentally misunderstands the mechanism of the failure.
What is the actual mechanism, sir?
Open the Deep Think dossier to the skill floor versus skill ceiling paradox. I am going to educate these taxable assets on why their beloved factions are rotting in the basement of the ledger, and it has very little to do with the actual rules written in their books.
Accessing the Deep Think protocol, Section 1, the skill floor versus skill ceiling paradox.
Read the analysis on Necrons first.
The analysis states that the primary reason Necrons, specifically the Star-Shatter Detachment, are thriving is not merely raw offensive power, but rather forgiveness. Necrons possess an exceptionally high skill floor. For the civilians listening, this means a Necron player can make several fundamental tactical errors.
Such as poor positional placement.
Yes, or exposing vital units or overextending into enemy territory. The army's inherent reanimation mechanics will essentially undo those mistakes for them, replacing the lost models.
And the counterpoint, the struggling armies.
Conversely, the anti-meta armies, currently struggling, possess a high skill ceiling. The report specifically notes that to defeat Necrons utilizing a faction, like the Tau Empire or the Gene Stealer cults, a player must be an absolute master of the movement phase and target priority.
Let's expand on that, Drone. Let us paint a picture for the mathematically impaired listening to this transmission.
I have the spatial simulation ready.
Imagine, if you will, a Gene Stealer cult player attempting to spring an ambush. They must carefully manage their crossfire tokens. They must calculate the exact distances of their deep strike deployment, navigating the strict 9-inch restriction from enemy models.
The margins for error are minuscule.
Non-existent. They must rely on a standard charge roll, 2 6-sided dice, needing to total a 9, which, without external modifiers, has roughly a 27% probability of success.
And if they fail?
If that player fails that single charge roll, their fragile Toughness 3 operatives are left completely exposed in the open. The ensuing Necron counterfire will annihilate them instantly. There is no forgiveness. There is no reanimation protocol to stand them back up.
A binary outcome.
The Gene Stealer cult player must execute a flawless symphony of mechanics just to survive, let alone win. If a Tau player fails to wipe a Necron unit entirely, leaving even a single model alive, the entire unit regenerates.
The dossier notes a specific statistic for Tau efficiency.
Read it.
If that Tau player miscalculates a for the greater good spotting chain, failing to perfectly sequence which unit guides which, their overall damage efficiency drops by a staggering 30%.
A 30% efficiency loss from a single sequencing error.
That is severe.
A single misclick of the brain, a single measurement off by ½ inch, and your entire firing phase evaporates into statistical nothingness. That is what a high ceiling looks like. That demands profound respect and dedication.
Which the community lacks.
The competitive community at large has absolutely zero respect and zero discipline. Which leads us to the real reason those win rates are in the toilet. Continue reading the Deep Think section on the abandonment of mastery. Let us expose the cowardice.
The abandonment of mastery. In advanced competitive analytics, this phenomenon is categorized under meta-chasing. The report outlines 2 specific psychological traps.
The first trap.
First, the investment trap. Truly mastering a high-ceiling army like Tau or Gene Stealer cults requires an investment of months involving dozens of lost games to internalize every spatial nuance and probability curve.
And the second?
Second, the efficiency trap. The report states the hypothesis clearly. If I am a high-level competitive player and I can win 70% of my games with Tau through intense, exhausting mental effort, or I can win 85% of my games with Necrons by playing on a relaxed autopilot.
The choice becomes obvious for the weak.
The competitive drive to secure the tournament victory often outweighs the personal pride of faction mastery. This behavioral shift creates a massive brain drain across the ecosystem.
A brain drain. Do you hear that, citizens? Your factions aren't unplayable. They have simply been abandoned by anyone with the cognitive capacity to pilot them properly.
The elite players have relocated their assets.
The true masters who could solve the Necron puzzle using the teleportation strikes of the Grey Knights or the towering fire lanes of the Imperial Knights have simply liquidated their assets. They looked at the ledger, realized they could get an 85% return on investment while practically comatose by buying a Star-Shatter Arsenal list, and they abandoned their core identities without a second thought.
And the remaining players?
Who is left piloting the winless 8? The gloth-brained masses, the inexperienced newcomers, the stubbornly loyal but tactically bankrupt casuals. They are the ones driving the win rates down to 38%.
It creates a feedback loop.
A vicious, self-fulfilling feedback loop of incompetence. The elite players leave, the faction's overall win rate plummets because only the novices remain, which makes the army look mechanically worse than it mathematically is, which in turn makes the Necrons look even more invincible.
An artificial crisis.
Generated entirely by a lack of tactical backbone in the community.
If I may, Senior Auditor, the Warp Friends entity also specifically analyzed the Chaos Space Marines.
What does the amateur say about the traitors?
He noted they are currently in a bizarre state of flux following the introduction of new detachments. Their current overall win rate is 43.7%, falling well below the meta average. However, the entity eagerly highlights a newly released detachment called Heron's Marauders. This new option showed an impressive 60% win rate this past week, although he concedes it is based on a very small sample size.
Of course he concedes that.
Meanwhile, the Renegade Raiders detachment remains the most popular choice, making up 35% of all Chaos Space Marine players, yet it maintains a dismal 41% win rate.
And his conclusion?
The Warp Friends entity seems incredibly hopeful, stating that these new detachments are exactly what is needed to breathe life back into the dying faction.
Hope is not a statistical variable I care to track, Servitor. A 60% win rate on a microscopic sample size is a statistical ghost. It is an illusion.
It lacks the volume to establish a trend.
All it means is that exactly 2 highly competent players brought that specific detachment to a local 3-round tournament and managed to not trip over their own shoelaces while rolling dice. It proves absolutely nothing about the wider meta.
What about the 35% playing Renegade Raiders?
The bulk of the Chaos Space Marine player base is sitting at a 41% win rate because, once again, they lack the spatial optimization to utilize their mobility mechanics effectively against the Necron blockhouses.
They're running into the wall.
The amateur content creator looks at this tiny blip of data and wonders if the faction will bounce back. He is staring at a shadow cast upon the wall and trying to hold a conversation with it, completely ignoring the light source.
I will update the ledger notes.
Speaking of things that cast a shadow, Servitor, what is the current ambient temperature in this archive?
The chronostat currently reads Standard Departmento Analytica Operating Temperature, Senior Auditor. We are holding at exactly 15 degrees Celsius.
Then why does it feel like I am sitting inside the active exhaust vent of a plasma reactor?
Perhaps a localized thermal anomaly?
This facility is a complete joke. I swear to the Golden Throne, the Administratum has completely lost its collective mind. Listen to that. The primary ventilation fan above my desk sounds like a dying orc dreadnought gargling Prometheum.
It has been operating outside optimal decibel ranges for
3 standard weeks. It has been grinding its gears for 3 standard weeks. And this recaf, this absolute inexcusable swill they serve us in the commissary, it tastes like engine runoff filtered through a pair of unwashed issue socks.
supply chains have been disrupted, sir.
They are rationing the quill ink again, Servitor. Did you know that?
I had noted a requisition denial.
I am expected to audit the complex, multi-layered geometric failures of an entire galactic player base, and I am given a rationing of exactly 3 drops of synthetic ink per diurnal cycle. It is an insult to the very concept of analytics.
I can draft a formal complaint to the Administrator.
And you, yes, you, the citizen listening to this transmission.
Sir, addressing the listeners directly outside of the audit protocol?
I know exactly what you were doing. You were sitting there smirking, formulating your little counter-arguments in your head. You think you understand the tabletop geometry better than the senior auditor?
They cannot transmit replies, my lord.
You think my assessment of the reanimation math is flawed because you won a game at your local hobby shop last Tuesday. I challenge you. I directly, formally challenge you, you arrogant, taxable asset.
A formal challenge logged.
Go down to the comments section of whatever primitive DateNet terminal you are currently using to access this file. Post your little theories. Try to correct my math on the overlapping threat ranges of a Monka devilfish insertion. Try it.
The civilian date nets are notoriously unregulated.
Write it out in your clumsy civilian vernacular. Prove your inevitable, crushing ignorance to the entire sector. I will personally enjoy cross-referencing your comments with the casualty lists of the next tournament cycle.
Casualty cross-referencing initiated.
You always think you know best. You always think you can do the auditor's job better than me. You wouldn't last 5 minutes staring at the raw, unfiltered data streams of the DeepThink protocol without suffering a catastrophic cerebral hemorrhage.
The data streams are heavily encrypted for a reason.
Servitor. Back to the ledger. Before my rising blood pressure shatters the Auspex monitors completely, what does the civilian contractor say about the Adeptus Astartes? Read the Space Marine data.
Right away, Senior Auditor. The Warp Friends report states that Space Marines as a whole are holding steady with a 50.1% average win weight.
50.1. Perfectly average.
The entity suggests this is a sign of perfect equilibrium. However, he then points out that the underlying data is heavily skewed by the Blades of Ultramar detachment.
The Smurfs. What is their win rate?
The Blades of Ultramar boast a 56.6% win rate and are entirely carrying the faction's overall statistics. The detachment makes up nearly 40% of the entire Space Marine player base.
Naturally.
The contractor, then, he does something highly unusual here, sir.
Unusual.
He asks his audience a direct question.
He asks his audience.
Yes, Senior Auditor. He asks his viewers, and I quote the transcript directly, what change would you make to sort of bring the Blades of Ultramar back in line, but not to just sort of run it into the ground, end quote.
I am slamming this heavy file folder onto the metal desk because words can no longer express my disdain.
Impact recorded.
You do not ask the civilian mob for balance adjustments. You do not poll a gaggle of statistically illiterate meta-chasers on how to fix a structural anomaly.
Democratic polling is not recognized by the Analytica.
The answer is not in the comment section. The answer is already in the ledger. It has always been in the ledger.
The Holy Trinity, sir.
Precision, volume, and mobility. That is the holy trinity of anti-Necron, anti-Marine, anti-everything warfare. And the true masters of the game, the ones who did not abandon their factions for an easy win, are already proving it every single weekend.
Shall I open the master files?
Open the DeepThink file to the section labeled the Veteran Premium. Let us pull back the curtain and show these citizens what actual ruthless tactical discipline looks like. Start with the Astra Militarum, the Grizzled Company Detachment.
Accessing the Veteran Premium. Why Guard and Tau defy the curve? The DeepThink report highlights that the Imperial Guard are currently the most successful anti-meta gatekeepers in the entire ecosystem.
The gatekeepers, tell them about the recent major.
A recent, highly analyzed winning list by a veteran player named Andrew Dickinger went an undefeated 5-0. The report explicitly attributes this phenomenal success to the Grizzled Company detachment framework.
The Grizzled Company.
The dossier states that this specific detachment completely solves the skill floor problem by layering overlapping defensive buffs onto extremely cheap disposable units while simultaneously providing high-volume, highly lethal fire from the backline.
Do not just read the summary servitor. Break down the technical synergies, the exact brutal math of the interaction. I want every citizen listening to understand the geometric violence being perpetrated by these veterans on the tabletop.
Understood. First, the report details the order overload mechanic. The detachment rule, known as ruthless discipline, adds +1 to the total number of orders a commanding officer can issue.
So instead of one order.
This mathematically allows a single Rogaldorm commander or a standard Cadian command squad to project buffs onto 3 distinct units simultaneously.
Extreme efficiency. What are the buffs?
Next, it details the reroll economy. Units actively under orders may reroll any hit rolls of a 1.
Standard enough, but what's the condition?
Crucially, the rule adds a secondary condition, if the target is within range of an objective marker.
Which they always are.
Yes, which the report notes Necrons almost always are due to their slow movement. If that condition is met, the attacking unit also rerolls wound rolls of a 1.
And the conclusion?
The dossier concludes that this mathematically destabilizes the core advantage of the Necron's high toughness profile.
It doesn't just destabilize a drone, it shatters it into a million pieces. Necrons entirely rely on the mathematics of toughness breakpoints.
The threshold where attacks fail to wound.
They expect your standard Strength 4 and Strength 5 infantry weapons to simply bounce harmlessly off their Toughness 5 and Toughness 6 metallic bodies. But when a veteran guard player is re-rolling ones to hit and re-rolling ones to wound across an activation of 80 different dice,
the statistical bell curve flatlines.
It flatlines. You are forcing the Necron player to make an absolutely unsustainable number of armor saves. It is volume applied at the exact geometric point of maximum leverage.
But volume alone does not stop reanimation.
Correct. Mere volume is never enough to permanently kill a Necron blob. You need to sever the head of the snake before it can bite back. Read the section on the precision eraser.
The Precision Eraser Protocol. The report notes that masters of the Astra Militarum are heavily utilizing the veteran sharpshooter's stratagem.
Or how much?
For the negligible cost of a single command point. When this stratagem is combined with the abhuman detail enhancement placed upon a low-cost commissar model, the player can effectively snipe the crucial technomancers and overlords out of the heavily guarded Necron infantry bricks.
Surgically removed.
Yes. This removes the reanimation buffs and defensive auras before the guard's main heavy weapons even begin to fire.
Precision. Do you see the elegance of it? The civilian players just aim at the body. They pour damage into 20 Necron warriors, watch 3 of them fall over, watch 2 of them instantly stand back up, and then run to the date net to cry that the game is broken and unfair.
A highly inefficient method of engagement.
The Master ignores the body entirely. The Master spends 1 Weasley command point, mathematically deletes the Technomancer, providing the crucial 5+ Feel No Pain durability buff, deletes the Overlords, providing the free stratagems, and suddenly,
the brick is compromised.
That unkillable, terrifying brick of silver warriors is just 20 overpriced, slow-moving targets waiting to be casually processed by a Doomhammer's main cannon.
But, Senior Auditor, what about the Cetan?
Ah, the Cetan.
The massive, godlike anchor units that the Warp Friends video is so utterly terrified of. How do the True Masters handle a Toughness 11 monstrosity? The dossier covers this under target selection. The report details the extensive use of 6 model Bullgryns squads.
Explain the Bullgryns to the civilians.
For the civilians, these are heavily armored abhuman units. They possess an objective control stat of 2, allowing them to easily contest primary scoring points, and they have an innate 4+ Feel No Pain ability.
And what do they do to the Cetan?
The Deep Think analysis states, and I quote, "They do not attempt to kill the Cetan, they simply charge them." The Bullgryns are so mathematically inefficient for a Cetan to kill in melee combat that the Necron anchor is effectively stuck in place for 3 or more consecutive turns.
Immutable geometry. This is the absolute pinnacle of tactical play. The Cetan is a massive point-dense asset. The Necron player fundamentally needs that unit to be traversing the board, destroying high-value targets, and earning back its massive points cost.
Earning its dividends.
The Veteran Guard player simply throws a cheap, stubborn wall of a human meat at it. The Cetan swings its godlike weapons, but the Bullgryns simply shrug off half of the incoming damage by rolling 4s on their feel-no-pain metric.
The return on investment for the Cetan plummets.
The Cetan is trapped. It cannot move. It cannot score primary points. It is mathematically neutralized for the entire game without a single anti-tank las cannon ever needing to be fired in its direction.
It is an elegant solution.
This is what the civilian contractor doesn't understand. He looks at simple win rates. He never looks at the actual board state. Now, turn the page. We've discussed the blunt instrument. Let us talk about the scalpel.
Turning the page.
Let us talk about the Tau Empire and the Monka Erasure Protocol.
Opening the Tau Empire Monka framework data, the Deep Think report classifies this detachment as the high-skill scalpel. It entirely relies on a brutally narrow 3-turn window of extreme, overwhelming lethality.
The goal.
The goal is to physically table the Necron opponent, destroying their entire army, before the Necrons can slowly outscore the Tau player on the primary objectives.
Break down the synergies.
The technical synergies begin with the AK -2 threshold. The Monka detachment rule provides a buff of -2 armor penetration, and the assault keyword to any guided units targeting an enemy within 18 inches.
18 inches. Close quarters.
Since the vast majority of Necron armor saves are either 3+ or 2+, this massive AP modifier pushes their saves down to a highly unreliable 5+ or 4+, completely removing their core statistical advantage.
Armor penetration is the absolute currency of the current tabletop edition. Servitor. Think of it like firing high-velocity munitions against standard flak armor.
It defeats the material threshold.
A Necron infantry block relies entirely on taking its armor saves on a roll of a 3 or higher. When you artificially drop that save to a 5, you are literally doubling the amount of raw damage that bleeds through the armor profile.
A massive statistical swing.
And this is the crucial part that separates the master from the novice. It requires the Tau player to fully commit to the aggression. They have to physically close the distance to within that 18-inch threat range.
Exposing themselves to counterattack.
They have to willingly risk the inevitable melee countercharge. This is the environmental friction that coward players refuse to engage with. They want to sit back at 36 inches behind a ruin and shoot safely from across the board.
You cannot play safely against the zombie loop.
You cannot. You must step directly into the fire. Read the master play for the precision overload. Explain how they ensure the Necrons do not stand back up.
Accessing the precision overload protocol. By utilizing the shocking firestorm stratagem for one command point, an entire Tau-guided unit temporarily gains the precision ability on all its weapons. The Scalpus Strike. The master play involves taking a unit of 3 heavy broadside battlesuits, or a full 10-man squad of breachers, having them guided onto a Necron unit, and instantly deleting the Cryptek character leading the squad.
The same principle as the Guard Sniper.
Exactly. The report notes, without the Cryptek, the unit instantly loses its 5+ Feel No Pain or its reanimation movement buffs.
And then comes the hammer.
Furthermore, the report heavily highlights what it calls the unit MVP, the Breacher Fish maneuver. This involves 10 breachers, joined by a cadre Fireblade character, rapidly disembarking from a Devilfish transport vehicle.
What are the numbers on that activation?
With the Monka bonuses active, this single unit outputs a staggering 30 shots, hitting their targets on a roll of a 2, with lethal hits active and at an AP of -2.
And the conclusion of the dossier.
The dossier concludes, this is one of the only units in the entire game that can reliably wipe a 20-man Necron warrior blob in a single, uninterrupted activation, thereby preventing reanimation protocols from ever triggering.
Let us break that magnificent sequence down for the citizens who are struggling to keep up with the advanced calculus. 30 shots.
Guided by a unit of stealth suits.
Guided by stealth suits, which allows the breachers to completely ignore the penalty for shooting and granting them re-rolls of wound rolls of 1. Lethal hits mean that every unmodified hit roll of a 6 automatically generates a successful wound.
Bypassing the toughness mechanic.
You bypass the Necron's high toughness check entirely. You are forcing 30 high-velocity dice straight down the Necron player's throat. Statistically speaking, you'll generate 5 automatic lethal wounds right off the bat, plus another 10 normal wounds that easily bypass the toughness check due to the rerolls.
15 saves required.
You are handing the Necron player 15 saves, all at AP -2. They are failing 2/3 of those saves. The entire unit is obliterated.
And because it happens in a single phase?
Because the unit is entirely wholly destroyed in a single phase before the Necron player has a chance to activate any abilities, reanimation protocols never activate. The rule simply ceases to function. You have mathematically overflowed the container. The damage exceeds the system's capacity to repair it.
System failure achieved.
This is the skill verdict, Servitor. The tools exist. They're right there in the books. The Tau players who are winning tournaments, the Guard players who are securing podium finishes, they aren't logging onto the datanet and complaining about Necrons.
They are farming them.
They are actively hunting them. They look at the silver tide across the table and see nothing but easy primary points and a mathematically predictable opponent. The current state of the meta is not a Necron problem. It is an audit of the player base's competence.
The player base is failing the audit.
The Necron wall is exactly as high as the player's inability to utilize the precision and volume tools already printed in their own codex. But of course, the amateur content creator doesn't see that. He is blind to the geometry.
He does attempt to forecast, sir.
What does Warp Friends predict will happen next? Read me his pathetic, hopeful little forecast at the end of his transmission. Let us see how deeply he misunderstands the corporation that creates his reality.
Yes, Senior Auditor. In the conclusion and forecast section of his video, Warp Friends states that the current meta is highly top-heavy. He suggests that Necrons, along with the Blades of Ultramar detachment, are likely candidates for significant nerfs in the upcoming balanced data slate.
His reasoning.
His reasoning is that Games Workshop will want to prevent the competitive scene from becoming stale as the edition nears its eventual conclusion. He expresses genuine hope that the designers will address these glaring issues so Necrons can be gently brought back in line with the rest of the struggling meta.
I am taking a long, agonizing gulp of this toxic recaf servitor to wash away the bitter taste of that civilian's naivety.
Senior Auditor, is the analysis fundamentally flawed? If a faction is mathematically overperforming, does it not follow that the game designers will reduce its power to restore equilibrium?
A cold, cynical laugh is echoing through this Analytica office, servitor, and it is entirely directed at you. They won't fix it because it isn't broken.
But the win rates...
It is working exactly, precisely as designed by the accountants. The civilian contractor looks at this 56% win rate and sees a simple balance issue. I look at this ledger and see a moral hazard.
A moral hazard.
I see a corporate entity executing a flawless, highly lucrative market manipulation strategy. Open the Deep Ink file on game design and business strategy. Read me the section on the marketing of the hero. Let us educate the unwashed masses on exactly how their wallets are being harvested by the administratum.
Accessing the marketing of the hero protocols. The report explicitly states that Games Workshop is, first and foremost, a miniature manufacturing company, not a competitive sports league.
The primary directive is profit.
For their primary marketing strategies to succeed, the so-called poster boys of any given season must intrinsically feel powerful on the tabletop. This relies on a psychological metric known as the feel-good factor.
Give the example in the dossier.
The dossier provides an example. If a brand new player purchases a newly released C-10 model or the latest Necron Combat Patrol box, spends hours assembling it, and then gets immediately tabled 5 games in a row because they have not yet mastered the tactical nuances of the movement phase.
What happens to that revenue stream?
That player is highly likely to quit the hobby entirely. Therefore, the designers engage in a practice called buffing the average. By intentionally making the army highly forgiving, artificially buffing the skill floor, they ensure the average unskilled customer has a positive, reinforcing experience.
And the unfortunate side effect.
The report notes, however, unfortunately, when you buff the floor to protect a beginner, you inadvertently hand a highly skilled master player a tactical nuke.
Precisely. You finally see the matrix, drone. The Necrons are the average friendly poster boys of the current product cycle. They are the safe bet for the consumer. The primary pipeline for new revenue is always the beginner, the fresh recruit.
They require a positive reinforcement loop.
They need that beginner to feel like an absolute tactical genius just by pushing gray plastic straight forward into the midboard and rolling a handful of reanimation dice. They balance the game for the 99%. They track the frustration metrics of the casual player in their garages.
They do not balance for the top tables.
They absolutely do not balance for the 1%. For the masters executing Monka erasure at the top tables of a supermajor. If a Master Guard player annihilates a brand new Necron player on turn 2 with a flawless artillery strike, the Necron player stops buying models. To keep the revenue pipeline open, the faction's floor must remain artificially unbreakably high.
But what about the MetaWatch trap, Servitor? The civilian contractor brought up that 45 to 55% bracket like it was some sort of holy scripture handed down by the Emperor himself. Yes, the MetaWatch trap. The DeepThink report notes that the designers have publicly repeatedly committed to maintaining a 45 to 55% overall win rate bracket as their strict definition of perfect balance.
Their public-facing metric.
They utilize a heavily reactive balance model. Crucially, they do not deeply analyze why a faction is winning. They do not separate mechanical skill from mathematical stat checking. They strictly look at the final percentage result.
And the Necrons.
Because Necrons are currently sitting at 56.6%, they are technically classified as outside the zone. The logic applied is usually quite blunt. If the line on the graph is above 55, we must mechanically lower it.
The dossier's critique of this.
The dossier criticizes this as a blunt instrument approach applied to a highly surgical problem.
It is an algorithmic reflex entirely devoid of nuance, but they are trapped by their own marketing cycle. If they lower the floor too much, the beginners get frustrated and quit. If they leave the win rate high, the loud, vocal meta chasers flood the date nets complaining about stagnation and refuse to buy new event tickets.
A catch-22.
Read the skill incentive conflict drone. This is the very heart of the Corkit liability. This is where the real money is made.
Accessing the skill incentive conflict, from a pure business perspective, stagnation is death. If Necrons remain at the absolute top of the meta for 6 consecutive months, tournament attendance begins to predictably drop.
It becomes boring to watch.
Players become bored of watching endless Silvertide versus Silvertide matchups in every final round. However, the report highlights a core tenet. Churn is profit.
Churn is profit.
By intentionally nerfing the dominant Necrons and simultaneously buffing a completely different faction, such as the Aeldari or the Tyranids, the designers actively force the meta chasers to purchase an entirely new army to remain competitive.
So it's not an accident.
The mass abandonment of factions that the civilian contractor noticed earlier is not a tragic accident. It is a meticulously planned revenue stream for the company.
Churn is profit. Engrave that terrifying truth onto the inside of your eyelids, citizens, so you see it every time you blink. They will nerf the Necrons in the upcoming March 2026 balanced data slate. That is a mathematical certainty.
The cycle demands it.
But do not delude yourselves into thinking they are doing it because of the underlying math. They're not doing it to reward the highly disciplined Tau or the grizzled guard players who actually solved the puzzle. They're doing it strictly because of tabletop stagnation.
The hype cycle is dying.
They need the prevailing narrative to aggressively shift, to force the meta chasers, the weak-willed cowards who abandoned their AdMech and Grey Knights 3 months ago, to sell their massive Necron armies at a secondary market loss and immediately purchase the next artificially buffed faction.
A highly managed ecosystem.
A rotating, endless spectacle designed from the ground up to trigger new quarterly sales cycles. They aren't balancing a competitive sport, they're curating a storefront window. And right now, they have brand new products sitting in the warehouse that desperately needs to move.
The new expansion.
Servitor. Pull up the future-proofing simulations for the early 2026 expansion, the Shadow Hunt release. Show the listeners what is actually driving this upcoming data slate nerf. Let us look at the real motivation.
Accessing the Shadow Hunt future-proofing simulation data now, Senior Auditor. The logistical data indicates the manufacturer is currently rolling out the new Shadow Hunt expansion releases, prominently featuring new Aeldari Corsairs and Kroot skirmish units.
And the analysis.
The DeepThink analysis states, quite bluntly, they absolutely have to nerf the Necrons right now to make room for the new Aeldari Corsairs and Kroot kits to feel impactful on the tabletop.
Why?
If Necrons remain the ultimate skill check king, relying on massive toughness and endless regeneration, absolutely no one will purchase the new, highly fragile plastic skirmish armies.
Exactly. Finally, some basic economic sense. If the competitive meta remains completely dominated by toughness, 11 C10 shards, and unbreakable self-repairing bricks of Necron warriors, who, in their right mind, is going to purchase a squad of fragile toughness, 3 Kroot carnivores wearing loincloths?
The sales projections would be abysmal.
No one. The entire new product line would die instantly on the store shelves. They must liquidate the Necron monopoly immediately to clear the stage for the new actors. They are clearing the board of the wall so they can pivot to selling you the fog.
The fog being the new skirmish mechanics.
But let us look at this supposed fog through the uncompromising lens of the DeepThink protocol. Let us apply the Departmento Analytica's combat simulation directly to these upcoming Shadow Hunt units.
Initializing simulation.
Servitor, run the Tau erasure list we discussed earlier against the projected Shadow Hunt pregame asymmetry mechanics. Let us see if these new expensive tricks actually hold up against the immutable geometry of a true master.
Running simulation. Tau erasure protocols versus projected Shadow Hunt capabilities. Section 1. The Shadow Hunt disruption profile.
What is the civilians panicking about?
The early community sentiment is currently massively overvaluing these new units because their rules specifically mess with the declare battle formations and deployment steps of the game. For example, the new Aeldari Corsairs feature a mechanic called Prince Iriel's Redeploy.
A parlor trick. How does it work?
After both players have fully deployed their armies, Uriel allows the Aeldari player to pick up and entirely redeploy 3 units. The dossier states this is a psychological mechanic, an attempt to bait your erasure firing lanes and then vanish the targets before turn 1 even begins.
And the Kroot.
Furthermore, the new Kroot hunting pack utilizes what the report calls the Kroot Lone Up wall. New Kroot shapers and trail shapers provide the lone, operative, or stealth keywords to their entire units, essentially clogging the opponent's targeting priority and mathematically forcing them to move dangerously close to engage.
It is an artificial challenge. It is a trick designed explicitly to confuse the mathematically illiterate. The civilian player sees the Aeldari opponent pick up 3 units and move them across the board, and they immediately panic.
Your game plan falls apart.
Their entire rudimentary game plan falls apart because they deployed their units to shoot at specific individual models. The master, the veteran, does not deploy to shoot models. They deploy to control geometry. Read the counter to the Iriel redeploy. Read exactly how we break the shell game before the first turn.
Countering the Iriel redeploy. Geometry control. The Tau analytical response dictates that you do not deploy your assets to hit specific enemy units. You deploy to cover overlapping zones.
The Monka zones.
Because the system relies on the immutable geometry of the terrain layout, it mathematically does not matter where Iriel moves those 3 units. If you deploy correctly, they will still land within the massive 18-inch Monka threat range of your pre-positioned Devilfish and Breachers.
The result?
The result is that the redeploy mechanic is entirely wasted. Iriel moves his units, but the undeniable math of your pre-established firing lanes remains constant.
Think of it like setting up a heavy bolter crossfire in a narrow-walled canyon. It doesn't matter if your enemy dances, hides, or attempts a clever shell game with their deployment. If every single square inch of that canyon is covered by your overlapping fields of fire, they are stepping into a kill box regardless of where they choose to start walking.
The radius is static.
An 18-inch radius is an 18-inch radius, regardless of what color the plastic inside it is painted. You lock down the midboard mathematically. Uriel can dance all he wants. He is dancing inside a meat grinder. And what about the Kroot? The great infiltration threat. The vaunted scout block they think is going to jail our transports in our own deployment zone. Read the counter-jail protocol. Show them the numbers.
Neutralizing infiltration. The simulation predicts that Kroot and Corsairs will aggressively attempt to jail your Devilfish using their pre-game 6-inch scout moves to block deployment zone exits.
And our response?
The Tau analytical response is to preemptively utilize your own stealth battlesuits and ghost keels. By infiltrating your own forward units exactly 9.1 inches away from their deployment line, you instantly create a no-fly zone that completely prevents them from utilizing their scout move forward.
Counterjail.
The result is a devastating counterjail. On turn 1, your breachers easily disembark, and because the Corsairs and Kroot are merely toughness 3 with a single wound, they are instantly erased by simple, low-strength pulse fire, rapidly clearing the lanes for your heavy hitters to target the real threats hidden behind them.
9.1 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Memorize that number, citizens.
Yeah.
Burn it into your cerebral cortex. It is the exact distance that wins games before the first die is even rolled. Why 9.1?
Because 9.0 triggers abilities.
Because 9.0 is technically within 9 inches, which triggers certain enemy abilities and deployment restrictions. 9.1 perfectly mathematically denies their scout move while keeping you safe. By placing a single ghost keel exactly 9.1 inches from their front line, you mathematically deny their entire strategy.
They're trapped.
They are physically trapped in their own deployment zone by a unit they cannot efficiently shoot. And those lone operative Kroot shapers, the ones whose special rules force us to get within 12 inches to even target them.
The report addresses that in Overcoming Lone Op, the precision scalpel. The Tau response dictates that your Monka system is fundamentally built on the assault keyword and high-speed mobility.
By turn 2.
By turn 2, your entire mechanized force is mathematically within 10 to 12 inches of the center of the board regardless. You simply use the shocking firestorm precision stratagem we discussed earlier to casually pick off the Kroot Shapers or the Corsair Psyker from within the mob.
And when the characters fall.
Once those key characters are assassinated, the entire buff stack instantly collapses. The Corsairs lose their crucial and vulnerable saves, and the Kroot instantly lose their stealth modifier.
They collapse like a wet house of cards in a Prometheum hurricane. The entire Shadowhunt expansion is simply the corporation's attempt to sell shiny new tricks to civilian players who cannot win with basic math.
It preys on the meta-chasers.
The meta-chaser, the absolute coward who bought Necron solely for the passive reanimation crutch, will eagerly buy these new Kroot models, assemble them, realize they require actual sustained brain activity and spatial awareness to pilot effectively, get predictably frustrated, and abandon them too.
It is the cycle functioning as intended.
But the veteran, the true master, the veteran looks across the table at these Toughness 3 Aeldari and Kroot units and doesn't see a terrifying new meta threat. The veteran sees speed bumps. They are nothing but chaff.
They serve a purpose.
They are actively helpful to the Tau player because they provide easy, squishy targets to effortlessly trigger strength from contentment or other crucial on-kill buffs before we pivot to pour the real devastating firepower into the enemy's heavy armor.
The audit summary is ready for your signature, sir.
The forensic audit summary is absolute and clear. The erasure list is not only perfectly safe from the current Necron meta, it is the exact, mathematically flawless counter to the upcoming Shadowhunt Tricks meta. The geometry of the board remains immutable. The time limit remains 5 turns. While the civilian community endlessly chases redeploys, infiltrations, and the newest plastic fad, the veteran system simply calculates the trajectory and deletes the models that are trying to be clever.
I will close the analytical files now, Senior Auditor. The ambient noise from the ventilation fan seems particularly loud right now.
It's just the silence, Servitor. The room is quiet.
Sir, your vitals indicate a sudden drop in adrenaline.
Look at this ledger, Servitor. Really look at it. Look at the thousands of games, the tens of thousands of hours of human lifespan represented by these little brightly colored civilian charts.
It is a massive data set.
It is profoundly exhausting. My anger, it burns out so quickly now, leaving nothing behind but this cold, metallic aftertaste of inevitability. Do you see what this tabletop actually is?
It is a statistical simulation of warfare.
It isn't a game. It is a mirror. A perfect, tragic, miniature reflection of a dying, decaying galaxy. Millions of players, millions of taxable assets, blindly chasing the newest data sheet, desperate for the newest injection of artificial power handed down by the corporate overlords.
They seek an advantage.
They abandon their core identities without a second thought. They sell off the intricately painted armies they spent years building, all for a fraction of a percent of simulated victory on a wooden table. They absolutely refuse to learn discipline.
The mathematics elude them.
They refuse to learn the basic, immutable geometry of the board they stand over. They would rather flood the date nets to complain that the universe is fundamentally unfair than do the hard, grueling work of mathematically optimizing their own position in life.
It is an unfortunate human tendency.
They are trapped. We are all trapped. Trapped in an endless, entirely artificial cycle of consumption led by algorithmic pacifiers and civilian content creators like this Warp Friends contractor who exist only to tell them exactly what to buy but never ever teach them how to actually think.
It generates revenue.
It is a slow, spiritual rot masquerading as recreation. And I am forced to sit here in the dark, breathing in recycled air, endlessly tallying the cost of their ignorance.
Shall I terminate the transmission?
For the love of the Empire, tap that like rune and hit subscribe on the Analytica feed. It is the only way you will remain enlightened when the darkness comes.
The data stream is closing.
I am closing the file. The audit is complete. If you survive your next deployment, ask yourself this, citizen. When the new data slate finally arrives and the meta inevitably shifts, are you actually playing the game or is the corporation simply playing you? Dismissed. Pay your tithes, citizens.